Town of New Canaan Town Council special meeting in the Town Hall meeting room and on Zoom for Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. It's 7:02. The Zoom meeting link is published on newcanaan.info on the calendar on the first page. Or you can watch us on channel 79. I see channel 79 is logged in. And we'll begin with the agenda. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Take your seats. I'm going to ask that everybody know that these microphones are not working, that we're all trying to project our voices to that microphone on the desk in front of us. So if that microphone can hear you, they can hear you online. With that, let's move to the roll call. Rich?
Okay, Tom Butterworth.
Here.
Robin Bates Mason.
Here.
Liz Donovan.
Here.
John Engel.
Here.
Sven Englund.
Here.
Mark Jimsky. Here. Steve Carl.
Here.
Mike Morrow.
Online?
Online.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. Maria Naughton.
Here.
Christina Ross.
Here.
Rich Townsend. Here. Penny Young.
Here.
Okay, you have a quorum. 11
out
and
of 12. Excellent. All right, the meeting is called to order. First order is the minutes, approval of the minutes for the July 21 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? Rich?
I like it.
Okay, and do I have a second? Penny? All right. Any discussion on the minutes? There being none, all in favor? All right, they are approved. Public comments. Members of the public are welcome to speak to the town council on the agenda topic scheduled. Well, there's two. The agenda topic scheduled for review and or vote. Speakers are requested to provide their name and street address, and comments will be limited to 2 minutes. So 2 minutes because I believe we have many speakers. So that being said, do we have anyone in the room who would like to address the town council?
I will list your John. I'll call him up.
All right.
Amy Finley.
And we're using the podium
She should come to the table.
to the table. Do they have an option?
I would rather have her come to the table to be closest to the speaker.
Okay. Amy?
So I'm supposed to go to the table?
Either one of these, I believe.
Thank you. Now, does this work or not?
It works.
Oh, good. Thank you, Chairman and the council. My name is Mimi Finlay. I've been a resident of New Canaan since 1973. In the July 13th planning and zoning approval, as you know, there was a condition number 8. Within 180 days, the library will present options for preservation of the 1936 building. I and many other resident taxpayers would like to know what we are getting for our $10 million plus that you are about to grant to the library and the possibility of default and debt. We all expect the preservation of 1936 and 36 edition in C2 to be adopted into the New Canaan Library plans. That the library has been hearing this polite request since 2012 or earlier. It is time to make this discussion part of an MOU, and that's what I'm requesting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi.
Patricia Oxman.
Hello, Patricia Font-Oxman, 277 Davenport Ridge Road, New Canaan. And I've lived here for almost 30 years. From the beginning, I've been focused on only one aspect of the library project, and that is saving the 1913 library. That doesn't mean that I'm happy with the way this project has gone, nor does it mean that I want my taxes to go up any higher. But what I do want is our 1913 building to come out of all this as a whole building, sitting where it always has, marking the land where this landmark has always been. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie Leahy?
Hi, my name is Jamie Leahy, and I live at 20 East Maple Street, which is really close to the library. I moved to Canaan when I was only a few months old, so I basically lived here my entire life. And one of the most distinctive memories I have growing up here is then visits to the library. Since we live so close, ever since a really young age, my mom would take me and my brothers to the library to choose books. When we got a little bit older, we would go to the book clubs and take part in the programs. And even now as a teenager, I use the library more than ever to pick out books, to find a quiet place to study, to meet up with a group for a project, for tutoring and tutoring others. The library already offers so many amazing resources to people of all ages, and by building this new library, I think it will be able to offer even more effective and accessible resources. I'm very excited that this new library will enable more free programs and classes for adults and children, since I enjoyed them so much as a child. And I'm really excited for the meeting spaces and study group spaces for meetings and study groups and tutoring, as well as places for private studying, all of which are really useful to any student. Plus, it'll enable more use of advanced technology, and my brother is really into that stuff, and he's very excited for the new makerspace. Personally, I'm very excited for the town green and the cafe. Since it's right in town, it's the perfect place to meet with friends, grab a snack, relax, and study. And I think having this space, as well as the other outdoor areas that the new library plan includes, will be very beneficial, and I can definitely see myself and other teens using it. Plus, I'm someone who loves watching plays and sometimes even taking part in them. So the performances that will take place on the green will be a lot of fun to watch, and I'm very excited to see the kind of events that will be held there. Overall, the library already offers so many amazing things, but I believe it's time for a new library that will expand on these aspects and offer even more resources. I think a new library and a town green will be a great addition to our team.
Thank you.
Robert Lowe?
Hello, I'm Robert Lowe. I've lived in New Canaan since 2009. I live at 99 Marshall Ridge Road with my wife and 4 kids. All 4 kids are part of the New Canaan School District. With my wife, we try to be active in the community. She's in the EMT. And as of July 2020, I joined the board of the library as a trustee. As a timestamp, that was called 13 months ago. And so obviously the proposal had been pushed forward, but in terms of the review, we were in the early days. And kind of that's part of what I want to touch on in my comments. This is the first time that I'm speaking at a public forum concerning the new library, in large part because I felt the plan had been incredibly well covered and vetted by the experts in place, and there wasn't too much to add. I'm speaking tonight because I feel that I've been in a unique seat for the last year to observe how the review process has unfolded. If I was an engaged resident, but did not have the time to study all the various ramifications and the things that have transpired in the last month or 13 months, I would want to make sure that the process that got us to this position for both the town and the library was thorough and focused on the right needs of town residents. Since it's been very public, I believe everyone would agree that between the town council, the Board of Finance, and the Planning and Zoning Committee, the library proposal has received incredible attention and focus, and the residents should feel very good that an appropriate review has been conducted by the town. What I want to focus on is that I think the same can be said for the process that the library has undertaken in creating and adapting the plan. The 3 key contributors to that plan have been the advisors, Centerbrook Architects and Stimson Landscape Architects. I think a lot has been said and you've had a decent amount of exposure to all of them. Second, the library team. Besides continuing to run a top library while dealing with COVID, Lisa Oldham and the team have led the planning process, which I've seen firsthand. The driving force for every decision was that they would create the greatest utilization of the library for all community groups, from babies to seniors, while being mindful of the capital that would be required. And then finally, the board. Our board consists of 20 members and proactively pursues representation from every aspect of town. Decisions are openly discussed and important items And for very important items, our president, Bob Putnam, routinely solicits every trustee's independent view. It's a good board. This plan has been driven by a large group of people representing many different perspectives from New Canaan and very close counsel for some of the most respected architecture and landscape firms. The fact that the majority of the project will be funded by donors represents an attractive investment opportunity for town. I believe the funding structure also creates a great and healthy alignment between town and community. With the new library in the town green, I believe that the town is going to get a new town center, a huge draw for our downtown, and a facility that can finally serve the incredible content that is created by a library team. I think it is important that we get started. We have delayed things to this point with minimum consequence, but I do not think that can be pushed on too much further. I think we're really excited to get going and appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tom Joyce.
Good evening. Tom Joyce, thank you for having me. I've been living in New Canaan for 9 years now. I have 4 boys, age 12, 11, 7, and 4. As you can imagine, I have a vested interest in this project. I'm also on the board of the library. My family is in Narragansett, Rhode Island now on vacation. I was with them this morning. I drove here today for this, and I will drive back there tonight to rejoin them. That is how important this project is to me and my family fully supports me being here. I was driving here today and genuinely thought of this story for the first time on the drive here today. And that is a little over 2 years ago, November of 2019, I was in Shanghai, China. I've been to China 40 times for work and travel. And I'm sitting next to the CFO of General Motors, China. And I said to him, what do Chinese children do on Saturdays? What do they do? And he said to me, well, they go to school half a day, they have tutors in the afternoon, and then they proceed to enrichment programs and music and so forth. And he said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, we go to lacrosse and soccer and football. And my kids, by the way, play lacrosse 11 months a year. I have nothing against sports. I played competitive sports in college. I love sports. But I'll tell you one thing, the friends that I have in this town, dozens, Mark included, dozens and dozens of friends, we are so invested in our wonderful sports programs. And I know we do other things. My kids take piano lessons, but we need more. My oldest son will get out of school on Monday when he starts at about 2:15 p.m. 2:15 p.m. And he will ask me every week for the rest of this school year if he can walk into town. And the answer more often than not will be no, because I don't want him on his phone in the alley next to Starbucks, in front of the old Mackenzie's, in front of Pinocchio Pizza and Dunkin' Donuts. I want him to have a green to gather on. I want him to go to a new library. I want him to have program enrichment, a maker's lab, and tech. I want more balance. Our community wants it. I've been forwarding the library video to dozens of families. They love it. They want it for their children. I will conclude by just saying a couple of things. I think we can all agree that we have some version of a generational existential crisis underway with our children, with electronics and other things. It is my opinion that we are possibly having the wrong debate about this library. Maybe we should be spending a lot more time talking about how great we're going to make it be, and the details of the programming and the technology investment and everything that will go into it for these children. Lastly, I think we have the wrong goal. We've all been around the world. We have been to many states in the US. There are very few towns like New Canaan. It almost doesn't exist. And we should not be trying to build the best library for our children in Fairfield County or in Connecticut. We should be building a world-class organization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eileen Thomas.
Good evening. My name is Eileen Thomas, and I live at 33 Woods End Road. I'm a lifelong member of the library, a lifelong resident of New Canaan, and I serve on both the Capital Campaign Committee and the Library Board. Back in early 2020, Town Council set the stage for what I believe is going to be the ultimate success of this new library project. Your meetings ensured input from the community, and it launched the inclusive process of deliberation across various town bodies, leading to this moment. Tonight, we're back for what we hope will be the final vote on this project, and we thank you for your efforts. Thank you as well to Planning and Zoning for their hard work, their inclusiveness, and their attention to detail. Addressing challenges makes our community stronger, and it encourages us to embrace a broader perspective. I think we have all learned from one another, and I hope that in the spirit of New Canaan, we'll keep working together to provide the best possible outcome for our town. The library's mission is to serve the community. From its founding in 1877 by a group of women volunteers to be a hub for education, culture, and community gathering, through today, the library strives to meet the evolving needs and desires of our residents. For more than a decade, thousands of volunteers and dozens of town officials have worked on this project. There have been many passionate voices heard from all corners of our community, from preservationists, from modernists, those passionate about an unencumbered library green, from families, teens, seniors, and very importantly, from our extremely generous donors. I've emphasized our donors here for a moment because they don't get much airtime, but they play a crucial role in this unique public-private opportunity. Our aim as a library is to listen to every voice in our community and to meet every need, or to get as close as we can to that. For us now, that means working together with planning and zoning to design a campus that includes a modern library building, an unencumbered library green, and a meaningful, respectful preservation of the legacy building that satisfies planning and zoning's condition. We're developing options that include a freestanding building of approximately 1,300 square feet and incorporates the original facade. And we are working to determine its appropriate location and develop plans for its use. Tonight, we'd also like to thank the Board of Finance for the unanimous vote of approval last week, recommending a $10 million grant for the new New Canaan Library. We're grateful for their creative problem solving and their offer of a lower cost AAA line of credit from the town. In their words, this is a win for the library, the town, and most importantly, New Canaan's taxpayers. We also appreciate their responsiveness and commitment in moving swiftly after planning and zoning's decision, meeting 3 weeks in a row, to keep this moving forward to mitigate the risk of losing our subcontractors, GMP, or other challenges. At that meeting, they expressed their enthusiasm for building an asset for our town for the next 50 years. Well, we're actually aiming for more than 100 years. And they referenced the support of thousands of residents. We are thrilled to have their endorsement and confidence and that of our 220 leadership donors, without whom this conversation would never have begun. Thank you to all who championed this project to this important milestone. We're eager to move forward and work as partners to build a tremendous new library that will bring our community together and strengthen its fabric for the next 100+ years. And tonight we ask for your support in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa Rambaya.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Rambuya and I live at 363 Hoyt Farm Road, and I've been a resident of New Canaan for 17 years. Tonight, I come to you as president of the New Canaan Board of Realtors on behalf of the Realtor community. We are proud to enthusiastically endorse the new library. We believe that the new library will attract buyers to New Canaan, elevate our downtown, and provide lacking resources such as an open green space, a concert facility to welcome speakers and musicians and plays, a flexible workspace for today's new world where many of our citizens are working from home, which will likely continue long-term. Our town prides itself on world-class education, and the new library is the perfect extension of the excellence we strive for. Our students will have the space to explore literature, enjoy story time, gather with classmates to complete projects, and to develop a love of reading. In addition, we believe that the library will draw in new commerce and provide additional financial resources for our community. The Library Building Project Group has kept the Realtor community apprised of their progress from the early stages. We've contributed financially to the project by sponsoring the Da Vinci exhibit last year. We are so proud and excited to tell clients about all that is to come. Many of our newest citizens have become the most enthusiastic supporters. The library is one of the top amenities a town like ours has to offer and should be a reflection of what New Canaan is, a beautiful town with top-notch facilities. It will help draw new residents. It will keep our residents here. It will surely stand as an impressive focal point with its mid-century modern architecture, which attracts so many to our town. We hope our officials will provide final approval for this important project and move forward with the financing to give the residents of New Canaan a library they can more than just be proud of. It will give them one they can be thrilled about. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Allison Zinzenko, and I live at 1580 Ponus Ridge. I'm the daughter of a book publisher. I studied English literature. I've worked in book and magazine publishing for decades. We moved to New Canaan 4 years ago for the excellent schools, beautiful downtown, the incredible local resources, and the sense of community. And like most New Canaan residents, I carry an enormous pride for all that is New Canaan. I'd argue there's no resource in town that touches more residents than the library. The library has a million invisible strings that tie us together as a community. It can and does serve every life stage, every interest, every topic of curiosity you can think of. This is why I'm passionate about the New Canaan Library. Libraries are so much more than buildings that house books. They play a crucial role in communities for the exchange of ideas and information, as a place for discovery, where neighbors meet and school children study. A town as special and distinct as New Canaan deserves a library that meets the residents' needs and reflects our values. We've all heard the stories of how our current library building falls short. It doesn't have the space or the right kind of space for the children, teens, adults, nonprofits, and business owners who come to the library to find a quiet space to read, work with classmates, or participate in programs. Neighboring towns have built new libraries more than a decade ago, and they are now investing even more in subsequent renovations, given the vibrancy and growth of their libraries after these original investments. I'm speaking today as a representative of hundreds of New Canaan families who have voiced their support for this project. Hundreds of volunteers have worked on this for over a decade, and over 200 donors so far have donated privately to help fund it. We know how transformational it will be for our community. Please lend your support tonight and vote to approve the Board of Finance's appropriation so we can move on to build this important and vital asset for our town. We'll thrive as a community with the new New Canaan Library, and we will reap the rewards for decades to come. Thank you.
Charlie Robinson. Unmute Charlie.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Charles Robinson, Team 32.
Thank you for allowing us to support McCarter Street. I've lived here since.
I have a simple request, which is evidenced by my letter of today's date to all town officials, primarily addressed to the town council. I ask that you replace entirely the MOU agreement, section 4.01, with the following language. The town of New Canaan will hold a first position mortgage on all NCLI property and will be further secured by a UCC 1 filing on all NCIL and CLI assets. TONC will also require an assignment of and physical possession of all NCLI plans, specifications, permits, and approvals, and development rights. Additionally, TONC will take assignment of and physical possession of all documents involving all pledged donations and grant proceeds awarded but not yet paid related to the contemplated building project. I strenuously urge that this language be adopted as a full replacement for what is drafted at this time. And I thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Laura Barker. I live at 54 Clearview Lane here in New Canaan. Thank you to the Town Council for allowing me to speak tonight. I'd also like to take a moment to thank P&Z and the Board of Finance for their unanimous recommendation to approve a $10 million grant for the library project being voted on hopefully tonight. Many of you know from my letters and P&Z speech that I've been a vocal advocate for the library's new building. I am also a local business owner, and like you, I have a vested interest in maintaining a vibrant downtown. I know that the new New Canaan Library will be state-of-the-art, aesthetically pleasing, and only steps away from town with a dynamic team running things. To me, that is a reason enough to approve these funds, but I can tell you firsthand that the new people moving to town, many from New York City, moved here because of schools, but also because of our charming downtown. Yes, COVID was tough for all of us, but town is coming back. From my lens, our new people have New York City habits, eating in town every day of the week, all times of the day. They have expectations for a dynamic menu with changing offerings. They want to live and have experiences with family and friends. Since many people are working from home, gone are the days where people only go out to eat on Fridays and Saturdays from 7 to 9 p.m. Life is changing, perhaps because of COVID or in spite of it. We are living in a world of the 24-hour news cycle and 24-hour access to things and experiences. With that said, our library must change too. It must adapt and reimagine itself to meeting our changing world. I am confident that the plan you have in front of you accomplishes that goal for the people of New Canaan for many, many, many years to come. So I ask you as a local business person and library project owner myself to approve tonight the $10 million grant to go along with the $17 million the library has already raised. I personally think it's time. How many people here agree with me? Raise your hands. So I say just say yes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I don't have anybody else raise their hand. Anybody else fill in?
Does anybody who did not sign up on the list wish to speak? It's an important enough subject.
No hands raised.
Okay, no hands raised, so we can move on to the business portion of the meeting. So we really have, this is a special meeting because it was supposed to be only on the MOU. We did tag on one other thing, which is the ARPA funds. We're going to have a conversation about the ARPA funds after this. But the meeting is essentially supposed to be the end of a two-year process. I think that started with, from town's point of view, started with the Board of Selectmen drafting that MOU with input from a committee of Board of Finance members and Rich and myself representing the town council. We had some input. It went back to the Board of Selectmen. It stayed there a very long time, much to my frustration and many of you. We wanted to participate in this MOU all along, and the Board of Selectmen said, when it's ready, we'll send it back to you. And we finally got it, and we debated, I think it was 10
19.1B. And that was the question of the inclusion of 1913. And we decided that we were not going to make the 1913 a town council decision or a part of the MOU. But we don't have to be held by that, right? The MOU is not complete until we vote on it tonight or whenever. So, but I want to remind you that the town council said that that is a decision of the P&Z, the 1913 question. And we respectfully deferred to the P&Z. And they spent months over at P&Z on the 1913, we'll call it the 1913 question. And they made a decision. And I think most of us, if not all of us, said, we're going to defer to P&Z, that's their expertise. And P&Z came out, tell me if I'm wrong, but P&Z said, you must respect 1913. They didn't tell the library how exactly to do that, but they said preservation is important in New Canaan, and it is an important component of this plan, and you've got to respect 1913 in some way. And we've been told that Centerbrook, the architects for the library, have been tasked with doing just that. Come back with something that incorporates 1913 into the revised plan. So here we are, and then I went to the Board of Finance, and one other major change occurred. Board of Finance decided, because they're the financial professionals, that the town is better suited to be a lender to this project than an outside bank. That's a change. So I believe that those are the last two issues in front of the town council with respect to this MOU that we should be discussing tonight. Whether you believe that the 1913 question has been adequately asked and answered and resolved to our satisfaction now, and whether the finances are in order. We were getting questions even today from Rich and many of you, and input from Charlie Robinson on things we should be considering. And I've heard from Penny that we might need more time on the financial questions. So those seem to be the two questions in front of us tonight. Penny, did you want to make a motion?
I do. First, I'd like to just say thank you to absolutely every single person in this community who has had input into this discussion. There have been people on all sides of the issue. We have had letters and phone calls and stops in the grocery store. And I think we have tried to address personally as council people each of those queries, comments, compliments, whatever. I have to wear the hat tonight as someone on the town council who's elected to represent everyone in town. People who are supporters, people who are preservationists, people who are preservationists and supporters, people who have not voiced an opinion, but I have to represent them, not my opinion, but represent them. And I also have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers to make sure that we have addressed all of the questions and the vulnerabilities of our town and the taxpayers thereby. We have had new documents presented to us with changes, MOU with changes, and the line of credit, which is a new document to us. I am uncomfortable having a document presented to us, having some level of discussion, and then voting on it the very same night. Board of Education often, if not as a common practice, has an issue presented to them, they discuss it, and then they let those comments digest and either form more questions or solve problems, and then come back the next month with a solution and a vote. And I think that we are at a junction where we can take one more month. We've waited a long time, and I don't think that one more month is going to make any changes in going forward. But I'm just uncomfortable having documents presented to me one night and having to vote on it that night. And so I would like to make a motion that we table the votes tonight and let the discussion occur, have the questions posed, have the questions answered. We've got Board of Finance members tuned in, so that we don't have any more questions and know that our decision is really the right one for the taxpayers, particularly from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint.
So I have a motion that would like to table the vote based on the reason that we want more information. Do I have a second on that motion? Okay, Christina. So it's now open for discussion. Does anybody want to respond to Penny, agree with her, disagree with her?
Penny, could you give us your points individually?
Okay, got a number of them, and in no particular priority order. What are the parameters that the library has given Centerbrook to respond to the B&Z ruling in the designs to preserve the 1913-36, if that is or isn't included? What are those components and what impact does that have then on the finances that the taxpayers through the town council and the Board of Finance will be responsible for? I hear bits and pieces of this having been discussed. I hear bits and pieces that it will be whatever that amount is to restore, move, demolish, whatever the building, that will be a forthcoming request for a grant from the town. So that's an additional amount of financial responsibility on the town. We've already given the library $475,000, which is 1/3 of the amount that they needed to buy the piece of property. We have given them land for an arrangement for parking. So we've solved that problem with them. We're about to give them $10 million. We're about to give them a line of credit. So I think we all have bent over backwards to accommodate the library, and I would hope that then in return there would be a substantial amount of respect to the history and character of our town as people describe. A second point is representation on the board of directors. If you were a corporation, you would have representation of the contributors on the board that represent the percentage of contribution to the corporation. We are asking for 2 board seats. I understand that there's 25 people on the library board. They only have filled 20, so therefore there is space for the 2 town council people. I would like to see in the bylaws written that those 2 seats are designated in perpetuity, not subject to board amendments, which is written in their bylaws, that the town will always have 2 members on the board, no matter what the size of the board. With regard to the first position in the mortgage, Bank will, in their document, and I believe it was what Charlie Robinson was designating, assignment of all plans, specifications, permits, and approvals and development rights. That is not written into the town's document, the line of credit. So therefore we could have the building, we could have the donations that are being ascribed to the project, but not the plans, not the approvals, not the permits, so that we could end up with a building and not the ability to move forward to it if in the event, and hopefully wouldn't happen, there's a default. So I think that's a question that needs to be addressed. I think also in the event of a default, and I actually could not find this in the documents, that the property just should not go to the federal government or federal or state government, but should be assigned to the town. And I think that should be someplace documented so that it is written and legally ascribed to the town. I think that's about it right now, but I think there's some questions that need to be addressed.
Tom Schulte, Chris Labrie, you still with us?
Do you want me to answer a couple of the buildings?
I was just hoping that they could address some of their thinking. Could you address Penny's comment with respect to your thinking around the line of credit, it being the major change, and the fact that you chose the, what was it called, negative pledge, which has been discussed by Chris Robinson. Can you talk about your thinking about why the MOU in its current form satisfied the Board of Finance? What was your thinking?
Chris, I don't know if you want to go first, having a little bit more history with this. I would just say that the line of credit, were it to occur at all, remember, it's only if there is a shortfall in the rate at which pledge donations are collected versus the rate at which they actually need the funds to continue with the construction. So it's a bridge to cover donation collection shortfalls off of projections, right? And the notion there is we tried to sketch out some of the summary terms to make it clear people understand the economics. But I think one of the principal parts that made me comfortable with it is that line of credit, when and if it's documented, will be in form and substance satisfactory to the town. So there's lots of provisions about the terms and the covenants and the reps and the other undertakings of that line of credit, which will be sorted out pursuant to separate loan documents to be negotiated at the time that those funds are needed. And as I understand their construction schedule, those funds were never intended to be put into the project, at least during the first, Chris or Kevin, you can help me out. I think it's at least 18 months, perhaps even further.
The mics aren't working, so you're gonna have to really speak up.
I was speaking of that.
Okay, good.
Can I address the question?
Go ahead,
The
Kevin.
town attorney advises that a municipality cannot take a mortgage, cannot, so that the negative pledge is the equivalent of a mortgage, but we cannot legally take mortgage. Otherwise, and we're taking a mortgage in the building. I mean, that's where our money's going.
Right.
We're taking a negative pledge against the building, not against the land.
And Tom is referring to other agreements that are not in the MOU.
We're going to have a loan agreement.
We're gonna have a loan agreement before any of.
But the negative pledge is established because we cannot legally take a mortgage.
Yeah, the negative pledge is a cloud on the title so that no other person would come in and could step ahead of us, right? It's not a document pursuant to which you can exercise remedies, but it is a document that basically frustrates or prevents anyone from coming ahead of the position of the town, at least with respect to the real property assets.
Go ahead, Chris.
So I think one of the important considerations with respect to the reason the Board of Finance went in the direction of wanting to substitute the town as the lender in the project is that it's very important that the funding to complete this building be in place. And our assumption from the beginning was that the town's money, the $10 million grant, would go in only under the circumstances where we knew that there was sufficient monies available to finish the project. Negotiations in the private sector between the library and a commercial bank came up with some requirements which are typical of commercial lending. I'm not saying that the bank did anything unusual, but they did insert certain language which would allow them to review the risk of lending, of actually funding a loan at the time when the library asks for the loan. So it's at the last hour of availability. And to us, that appeared to be a great risk. And we, after some thought, said, well, the town would be able to assure the library that the funding is there. As a corollary to that, which was a great benefit, is that the town could provide the money at about 1/4 the cost of a commercial lender. So between the economics of this deal and the structure of the deal, we went with the idea of substituting the town as the lender for the construction of completion of the library.
So John, I would say that months ago, when we talked to the bond council with the town, they said most towns would extend the credit because we can borrow so much more cheaply. It's not unusual for a town to extend the credit. This is cash flow financing. Pledges will be 3 and 5 year pledges. And by their nature, even if all the $13 million is raised next year, it's going to come in over 2 or 3 years, 4 years. So it's cash flow financing. And we can issue 5-year notes under 1% next 5 years easily.
So we have a motion from Penny to delay the vote because of new information. I want to tackle all this new information systematically so that we can identify, do we have new information, and ask those questions and get them answered. Another one she made, since you're already sitting here, is that there's going to be an additional cost to the 1913 component implied by the P&Z decision. Is that something you're prepared to address now? Is there going to be another cost? And is that in the MOU, or is it not part of the MOU?
It's not part of the MOU.
It's not part of the MOU. So when Charlie Robinson says, can you review the capital stack for the library tonight? To me, that's $18 million worth of pledges, $10 million worth of town contribution, and $12 million, maybe 13, of bridge loan gets you to the entire project. But the project could go more, and that hasn't been addressed and is not going to be addressed in the MOU.
Well, the MOU says none of the $10 million, none of the town funds can be used for the preservation of a historic building. So the question.
Say that again.
The MOU says that
Okay.
none of the town's funds can be used of the fund we're talking about under the MOU.
The capital stack, the 40
Capital
million I
stack
just
can
described,
be used for preservation, right?
the town's portion.
The Board of Finance and everyone understands that the Planning and Zoning Commission decision will involve additional costs, and Board of Finance has said that will be a separate MOU and appropriation in the future. Now, the town has said we're going to be part of that, but presumably the library has said they won't be part of it. But on the other hand, the preservationists and those who want to preserve the 1913 building will have to also contribute. But that's part of, that is not provided for in this MOU.
Not answering my question of in the event of default, that the library is not able to raise the funds for the project of the cost.
In the
Who's on the hook for that?
well, default in the sense that you know,
Say the cost is, say the project is 40 million, right? That just as
38.5 right now.
number, right? And the library is not able to, in the next 5 years, raise the amount of money to cover 40 million.
Well, the
building
building
is
will be
built.
built in 2 years.
Okay. so
Right,
then who's-
and we're going to
who's
provide the
paying?
cash, if there's a shortfall, and there likely will be a shortfall between the pledges
I
and
get
when the
that.
pledges are paid. So I'm not sure what you mean by default. I mean,
Well, suppose they aren't able to raise $40 million
Ever,
ever.
ever.
They can't repay the loan.
Then
They can't repay the loan.
if they don't raise another $13 million, it'll be the town's responsibility with the library to continue to fund that $13 million.
Where's that? in the MOU?
That's what it says, by virtue of extending credit, which will go out 10 years. They're going to have an obligation. There's a good faith obligation to raise the funds in the MOU. And I think everybody fully expects we're going to raise the funds. But as a cash
that
flow
was a
matter,
conscious decision, basically to say, yes, we're standing behind the library, not standing behind Bankwell, standing behind
right,
the library.
that's the key
That was a
point.
conscious decision to say, we don't want to be buying our library back from Bankwell.
But I think Penny's asking a question though that everybody, that a lot of people have asked me, which is, does any condition exist where the town does not end up with the library and the land and the right to run? If the library fails, I don't care how it fails, I don't care who we owe money to, we're getting involved with right now. is there any position, because the town needs a library and we're gonna pay that money to get whatever it is.
Right.
And having Bankwell in the middle of it, I think was a problem. I think this is a brilliant solution. I really do, but I still don't have a warm and cuddly feeling that, especially with Mr. Robinson's discussion here and doing and of course, the loan document later. Is there anything statutorily or anything else that if the library goes upside down for any way, shape or form, that land gets sold to a developer?
Well, there are no other creditors. There are no other creditors by virtue of the town being the line of credit. There are no other creditors of library of any significance.
Well, there will be though after the library is complete. Now, there could be under the MOU, the library can borrow money after the library is complete, even without paying us back.
Right.
Right. And it doesn't say that we're in first position. It just says that they can borrow money against their
Keep in mind, the town,
against their non-building assets.
the town provides 70% of their operating expenses. We have a conversation every year about their budget. So if things don't go well with fundraising, we're going to work with the library over years to get the fundraising done and funded. But on the other hand, the Board of Finance members talk a lot about default, what it really means to have a default.
Right.
We don't want to own the library. It's an independent non-501c3. We want them to succeed, and they will succeed. So,
Well, my view is exactly that, Kevin. I mean, all of the money that supports the library comes from, whether it's taxes
That's
or
right.
whether it's people giving it charitably. And I think giving it charitably is a better idea, quite frankly. I think it goes to the people that really want to do it. And so I think everything is being done properly. But I think that people want to be assured that the library will not go away, even if the library fails in some way, shape, or form. And all of this discussion just muddies the water further. Oh, we can't have a mortgage because of the law, and we can't do this. Hey.
well, but the discussion about the federal government and the state government versus the town, how do we provide it for that?
So
You can come sit.
Because normally,
Yeah.
normally a nonprofit, if it fails, the state has an interest in it. The state will get involved, but we provided for that.
The current letter of incorporation says that should the library be dissolved, it could be passed to another nonprofit, the state, federal, or local government. Last week, Judy Neville made it a condition of passing what was passed, that we change our letter of incorporation so that in the event of the dissolution of the library, the only person or the only entity that can take it over is the town of New Canaan. It's sorted. It was sorted last week.
I remember her asking, I didn't remember her getting it.
The legal
it's
forms
done.
are already filed, well, they're being filed, but I mean, I can't say that the state of Connecticut has finished with it, but it's being done.
But keep in mind, the state of Connecticut will,
It's provided in Article 16.
The MOU.
the state of Connecticut will get involved if they have to. But if the town of New Canaan is providing the funds and operating the library, they're not going to have any reason to get involved. But statutorily, they have the right to intervene in a nonprofit.
I think we need to be aware that there is a possible downside risk and that we should be asking those questions. I'm not comfortable sitting here and without asking.
Well, the Board of Finance has asked a lot of questions over the last
And
year.
I
And I
totally
think
respect
at the end of
that.
the day, a lot of debates were held with the library about various options. We didn't like Bankwell being in there for that reason, because it complicated the picture down the road. We only want the town and the library to be responsible for this.
Go ahead. Penny, I mean, I agree with asking the question. Board of Finance actually called it sort of the doomsday scenario. So we're talking about 99.99999% this will succeed. But then the crazy chance that it doesn't. It's worth asking the question, but when you have $17 million against that problem, and then you add our $10 million, now that's $27 million that's already paid for that property. The actual property, forget about the buildings, that block in the center of town, if you just do the simple math, the value underneath that piece of property is there, no matter what. And if the town owns it, the conversation's over.
But the town doesn't own it.
The town owns it as of the minute that document is signed.
And when the building is completed, the obligation is dissolved.
That's the goal here, to have a completed building. And
I'm not even talking about the building, I'm just talking about the ground underneath it.
Well,
The
I'm
town
told-
will own that ground to do whatever it wants to do in that 99.999 doomsday scenario. That's the bottom line, is you own an asset that's tremendous.
You only own it until the obligations is completed. And then the library is the only owner of the property.
No, I'm talking about the doomsday scenario where we get the property.
Okay.
So the value, just the value of the property is less in that doomsday scenario.
I don't disagree with that. I just think that the terms need to be just as defined as bank loan, right? But in terms, what is the repayment period? What is
A regulated commercial lender is gonna have obligations to do things that we don't have to do.
I
Right,
understand,
so we don't have to match what bank will.
but the terms need to be specified.
But that's in a separate, what we heard was that's a separate document that'll dictate when the library gets the money and how they'll repay the money and the interest rate and all that. It'll be in a separate document. It's not part of the MOU, but they won't get $1 until that document is completed to both parties' satisfaction.
And we don't have a say or are able to view that document, which is part of this entire agreement.
We'll see that document.
Not before we approve.
No, we're gonna approve an MOU long before those commercial lending documents are negotiated. But they won't get any money without it. So it's in the library's interest to work out that commercial paper to everybody's satisfaction, to
So-
theirs and the town.
So I'm assuming from what you're saying that we're not going to vote on this until all those documents are presented to you.
The MOU says the town is willing to extend a $13 million worth of credit, subject to, that piece of paper. That piece of paper has yet to be negotiated between the town and the library, the repayment schedule. I mean, I know Chris wants Chris, you're up next, but Chris used all kinds of fancy words like pari passu in their conversation about this document, but the document doesn't exist yet. But they've already anticipated a lot of the clauses that will go into it. And what I hear Steve saying is if they don't raise another $1, right? They take this money, they build the library, they get halfway done, or let's say they get all the way done, and then they don't have any pledges. It reverts not to the federal government or to another library, it reverts to us. And Steve Carl is saying we sell it to some developer and get our money back. That's what Steve Carl wants. Don't quote me on that. We were saying doomsday scenario. But you're saying essentially that the town's security is the dirt under the building. You're ignoring the building entirely. You're saying the dirt alone is security.
If the town of New Canaan and the fathers of New Canaan don't think one of the most prestigious blocks in this town is worth $13 million, $14 million, whatever that number is.
For the gas station go for?
That little piece of it for $4.5 million. So there you go. It's a little tiny compared to what the library has. So that's the point. And we're going round and round here, like we have for 2 years on little tiny technicalities. We have to decide tonight if we are going to support this project or not. And you have had the Board of Finance spending the last 3 weeks, several of these guys, including Todd Lavieri, Tom Schultz, Chris LeBrie, Neil Budnick, these guys have been on vacation getting us to this point. Their wives are ready to divorce them. Ready to do this. So I understand there's tacky little stuff left here, but I love you, Penny, but it's time. It is time.
That's fine,
And the reason we have this vote is if you are against the project, that's why we have a vote. And that's why we raise our hands to either support it tonight or not.
I have never been against the project.
But you want more time.
Could we just address one other question about board seats? I do feel like we changed the MOU.
We got what we wanted.
We got what we wanted. I don't understand how that's a concern now after that being something we discussed.
The bylaws have been amended, right?
No.
No, I
The
didn't
board
see
of
it.
directors and electors.
They will be.
We got what we asked for in the MOU.
Well, wait a minute.
The question is,
It's
the
not
question is,
connected.
the MOU refers to the 2 board seats, but some members of the town council were not able to find a document out there that says the bylaws have been changed. So could you address the timing of that?
I would adore it too. So first, you asked us to make one change about 18 months ago. We immediately changed our bylaws. Then you changed your mind. So now we're waiting for this to get voted on. We'll immediately change bylaws tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
Sure.
Okay.
But we decided not to change them again until you had finished.
Okay, thank you.
So look, I agree with Steve. I'd like to come back to one other issue, and that is for everybody to really understand the 1913 building solution planning and zoning. And I'd like somebody to explain it to them, because it said it's not funded by the town, it's not funded by the library, is what I heard tonight. Right, and so it's going to be funded by the preservationists.
And the town.
Is this?
Perhaps Lisa could best address.
I think the first step is we were given 120 days. We have a building permit to get. We have a lot of work to do with town departments right now. We have all of our architects and engineers working on getting to the starting line on this. It costs money to go back and do the planning for a new structure. We've already started having some conversations with them. They understand what the condition says. We all are will work in good faith to honor those conditions. We have to deliver options, plural, to the planning and zoning team for them to consider. After that, we'll be able to go through the full process with planning and zoning with all the ensuing costs of doing that. You can imagine we're focused right now on getting to the starting line. Hopefully that'll be in the next week or two. Then we can put attentions onto the condition. As Eileen mentioned, the plan that is central to this will be a freestanding structure, including the front facade of the original building that will be on the site. It will be in accordance with the condition, and it'll be developed into a plan. It'll be costed out. We then need to build the new building, build the lawn. We'll have to keep fundraising, and fundraising can come from various sources. But I don't think the library has said the library's not paying. The library has not said the library's asking town. I think people are assuming that as a community, this is something clearly that we wanted collectively, as Kevin said. We're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. No matter where it sits, we have to figure out how to pay for it. And that's going to be collectively the responsibility of the whole community. Fundraising, maybe the town wants to get involved. I've heard that from people in town, but it certainly hasn't, I haven't said that's how it's got to be. We don't know what it will even cost yet. It's not appropriate for us to have that conversation yet. We don't know what those costs will be. Once we know what that is, once we've got all the other things in place, we can do the fundraising for that. And how that shapes up, I assume, like everything else in this town, will be a miracle of generosity and good fellowship. And we will get there and it'll get built. But I don't know exactly today who's going to come up with the money for that.
Question 19. The cost of that commemoration or the renovation is not germane to the MOU. The MOU does not bind the town to incur an expense in that regard. So let's do tonight. It's all, and the Board of Finance clearly discussed it in that fashion. This is tonight. And then the next step in this project is a separate MOU that addresses this 1913 issue. After the plans are reviewed, after we know what we're dealing with, there'll be a whole nother discussion about what that is, how much it's costing, who's going to pay for it. And that's always been in this discussion from the beginning. But because we mandated that by passing it in the way we did.
But the 39.5 does not cover the 1913 solution.
No.
Right, which is, I think, is relevant at times.
Yes,
right?
yes. Well, we
So
should
it
make it.
doesn't cover it, and the going forward on the library, which I'm thankful for, is not contingent on the 1913 solution. That is a separate.
I have a question. When you said that the architects were working on the facade, are you implying that it would only be the facade that would be saved or the building?
1,300 square feet, you said.
I did.
So that's not just the facade.
But that would be the size of the new building. I'm not sure what you mean by the building.
1913 building.
What do you mean by the 1913 building? I'm not clear what you mean. Besides, beyond the facade, which bits of it do you mean?
Did you interpret planning and zoning to mean that the facade needed to be saved or the building?
Neither of those things is what it says. It says that elements of the original building that predate 1937 be preserved. It doesn't say which ones, how many, how much. But we think the entire facade is what we heard people care about. And we've also heard that we think it's a whole building that people want. They don't want something that is less than a building.
Let me ask, let me back this up. I hear the concern from Christina, Penny, and Patricia, and Mimi, and many in the community that we're not taking, I'll paraphrase, that we're not taking the P&Z decision seriously enough. That P&Z said 1913 is important to this project. Preservation is important, generally speaking, to this community, and 1913 is specifically important to this community. And so what I hear Christina saying is, if you present this plan to P&Z and they say that's not good enough, then that's just the beginning, that's the starting point. And you do take 1913 seriously, preservation seriously, and that's just the beginning of a process to get P&Z satisfied that you've met the conditions, right? That because what we're concerned about is that we said P&Z is responsible for questions of preservation and questions of 1913. And to sign the MOU, what I hear many of you saying is, when P&Z says this is important, then it's important to us. And I think some of you want to hear the library say, and it's important to the library, and we're going to continue to work on this. That this is not just well, we put it to P&Z and they didn't like it, so take it or leave it. I mean, this is beginning of a process.
Right, and I would go further. I would say what we've heard is it's important to people in this community. And I think that was one thing I didn't hear you say. The other thing is it needs to be something that is appropriate and honors both buildings, right? So we need to make sure that its relationship to the other building is appropriate so that one is not overshadowing the other and things like this. It's serious architectural work that needs to be done here and it hasn't begun yet. So it would be inappropriate for me to speak too much about it because we haven't done the work. But the intention is that a building, a freestanding building of the dimensions we talked about. And beyond that, I think, probably not worth saying too much more.
Yeah, you shouldn't, because if everybody here is going to parse every word and get very nervous about what you said and didn't say. And that's why I want to kind of take it back and say, is this the beginning of a process, or are you just like about to put it out there and say, this is it?
Sure.
Because
I think I know.
Big difference. Because I hear, and who's going to pay for it, and all kinds of anxiety around this building.
It's a really good question, and I think to Christina's question, do you mean the facade or the 1913? And I wasn't being facetious. I was trying to understand what that means. But if we are going to try to preserve more than the facade, that's a much bigger project, right? And so when the question is, what does it cost? Well, those two go hand in hand. And I know this body is concerned with both of those things. And we're obliged to come up with more than one option, which I think is hopefully what people want to hear. That there won't be just one option, that there'll be several options presented. But we need to pay architects to do this work. And at the moment, we've got them fully occupied trying to get to the starting line of the existing project. We then have probably a couple of months to complete our obligation for the step one in the next process, which is to figure out what this other building will look like. And then we can start talking about what it costs. And then maybe in a couple of years, we can talk about who's going to pay for it.
Doesn't planning and zoning have to approve whatever they come back with? So if they say we don't like it, then doesn't the library have to try again?
Right.
I think that
And that's central to whether you vote on the MOU, is if you believe that the protections are in place, or you don't. And if you don't believe the protections are in place, we need to talk about that. What you just said is that you believe that the P&Z has to be satisfied before the site plan is finally approved. So, go ahead, Tom.
But to play off something that both Penny and I think Christina has raised, or designer said, your instructions to Centerbrook will not be to limit their analysis to just the facade. Right? You're not going to tell them those are the only options we should present to P&Z.
We all have the condition of approval to look at. That's what we're using. That's what we're using.
They use pretty tight language in that condition. Well, it's. I think Steve and I can attest that they have to get approval. Yeah, Mark and I sit in the building committee meetings, and that is something that is discussed during the building committee, that there is strong commitment from the library to preserve the 1913 building in some way.
I don't know how many of you have worked with architects, no offense, Christina, but I've never seen any of them deliver the smallest project possible on the first go.
Exactly, the client demands it.
I think it's in the thing from the beginning, it's in the library's best interest to please as many people as possible. I mean, and they've been juggling this from the beginning of time. And this is what they're going to do from here on out. They're not changing course. They're trying to do as much as they can for this town. And I see it, you know, when I'm in those meetings, they're literally pulling their hair out. I mean, and Mark and I have sat through these meetings for months now. And it's amazing the amount of work that they do behind the scenes. So.
Well, the one thing that keeps coming back to mind is that for the longest time since this project surfaced before the town council, that we were going to see the MOU, that it was going to come through, that we would see the document, and nothing has materialized until the last minute. And now all of a sudden we're being asked to vote on something without the right answers or the complete answers. And I think it's an unfair position to put the town council in.
No, I'm going to respectfully disagree and say that most of the MOU has been circulating to the town council on more than one occasion in its current form since February. Although you are 100% right that I was surprised by the issue, the offering of credit. So much so that I wrote back to Charlie Robinson, if he's still out there, 3 weeks ago, and I said, the library and the town decided that needed the flexibility. And then they changed their mind and decided the flexibility wasn't worth the cost and the complication.
Absolutely.
But that is really the only change since February, with the parking also changed. But we knew that, I'm going to say in May.
Yeah,
right. That change happened.
You've seen the draft that the Board of Finance has had for months.
Right. It's been publicly available.
Wasn't this brought up a year ago? Board of Finance meeting talking about this line of credit possibility until we started it was a year ago. And then Sandy Dawson, she could have said this is not an exception.
Right.
That's why I was so confident when I said, Charlie, this has been discussed and decided. We're moving on. And then thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chris. They reversed themselves. So, but that's their prerogative. They studied this hard and they weren't bound by their prior decisions.
For our taxpayers out there, it's a simple question. You go to your bank and you say, I'd like to take out a line of credit at Bank A. Bank A gives you a 4% rate. And then you go to Bank B and they give you a 1% rate. Which bank are you going to go with? I mean, it was a simple case of saving money. And taxpayers like to save money.
Somebody asked me today, Kevin, is that another gift we're giving the library? Are we giving it to them at 0%? And I was like, wait a minute. So why don't you tell us what is?
We're adding 25 basis points to our cost of funds.
Okay.
Right? Again, we can borrow remarkably for 0.74% for 5-year money. And it will be a AAA credit in the next 5 years as we have to issue notes, right? So the cost is going to be
And you're passing on most of that savings to the library. And I think
Yeah.
you estimated, or somebody estimated, what is the cost difference between the Bankwell deal and the town deal?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Something like $350,000 difference between the two.
Yeah.
And is that,
Maria Naughton is trying to speak.
okay, Maria Naughton, go ahead.
Okay, I have two comments. I mean, one about having a little more time to look at the MOU. I have to say, this sort of, I mean, it was a big surprise. It wasn't like a little addition. It was, doubling the amount of money we're talking about, and publicly that troubles people when the amount keeps going up. But I have two things. One, I was wondering, I know we put the public notice in the paper about tonight's meeting, which referred to the vote on the bond. Is there an obligation to put a notice in the paper if we're giving a line of credit?
Not for a line of credit. When we issue bonds in the future, we will notice the bonds in the future. So the first extension will probably be next September, October.
And
that will come.
Sorry, you can finish, Kevin.
No, that will come in the future.
Okay. The second question is, I know if I take out a line of credit, there's, my house is securing the payment and the loan. I feel like for $10 million, shouldn't the property be securing it, not this negative pledge? I'm kind of worried about this idea of an agreement that's securing the line of credit and not an actual property.
Two things to address that. One, we cannot take a mortgage that we discussed earlier in the meeting. So we cannot use the same legal vehicle that Bankwell would have used. And Judy Neville, number two, Judy Neville addressed it, basically closed the last loophole by saying only the town is standing there in the event of a default. So in two ways, the negative pledge is because we can't take a mortgage, and Judy Neville said, no, not and or the federal government and or another library. We are the only ones standing behind the loan, and it's default. Did you hear those in the beginning?
I did.
Well, it's a grant. The 10 million is a grant.
I just wanted to clarify, because people keep using, there's a grant and there's a line of credit. And you can't say we're doubling our grant. We're not doubling our grant. Maria used it. I just want to be clear to the public that there's a line of credit and it's a grant. The grant doesn't get paid back. Line of credit is there to help bridge the gap between when submit and the construction costs that occur. We cannot say we're doubling we're not doubling, we're not paying, we're not giving to library 20 million. Just be clear. I just want everyone to be clear, but I keep hearing.
And it's no different than even if Bankwell was in it. If Bankwell was in it, the library failed, we would step in. We would step in and take it regardless. That's the only thing we can.
We don't really want to operate a library ourselves, but we will step in if need be to support the library.
So that part of the MOU did not change.
Yeah.
Correct.
A lot of credit also means you don't necessarily take the whole thing.
Correct.
I don't think they're allowed to take. Are you allowed to take the whole 13 million on day one? No, there's going to be probably some anticipation.
Well, I don't know about allowed, but why would I want to incur debt if I don't have to?
Right.
But I think, John, I wanted to just say, to you say people have asked you, are you giving the library this for free or something? The answer should be, this project is being done by the people of New Canaan, whether through the vehicle of the town government and taxes for part of it, or through private pledges where people are choosing to give. So whatever the answer to that question is, we are making this better for all the donors who are going to contribute by reducing the total cost by offering this money at a cheaper rate than if they had to go to a commercial lender. And I think we miss the point when we look at the library as other. We're one community. We're trying to do one project, and we're trying to figure out the best way to fund it to make sure it happens. And I think the idea that this is adversarial, which some people seem to think is a nonsense. It's not adversarial. It's a project for the whole community. And by being our lender, at a really reduced rate compared to the commercial lender. Who we're helping are all those families, thousands or so families that are going to be donors to this project, because they won't have to put in quite as much because we got lower interest rates for any borrowing.
I think I've heard from all of you except for Sven.
Obviously, having sat through all the Board of Finance meetings, I'm fairly satisfied with Tom and Chris, all the folks there, their work. I was very satisfied walking with that. So as far as the Board of Directors representation, so we're going to have an amended set of bylaws tomorrow night at your meeting.
We'll put it on the agenda.
And I'm
it will.
I'm willing to take your word at that. As far as the preservation of the 1913 library, which I would like to see in a substantial way. I understand that we are still relying upon our friends at planning and zoning to make sure that whatever arrives, is going to be good for the community. I'm willing to stand by that. And as far as our $13 million line of credit, yeah, the town and the library are joint debt. Okay, so we take care of 75% of their budget every year. That's our commitment. Now, the fact that we're willing to provide them, a line of credit, at a super reasonable rate, 0.7%. Seriously, that's like free money with inflation. I think that's a good thing. This is where we should be. We should be facilitating the construction of the new building, right? The construction of the new building, in my mind, is separate from the preservation that I want to see of the 1913 building. I know that maybe that's not a popular view for some people, but it is within my mind, and that's the way it is. Penny, I appreciate what you said.
Yeah, Tom, we gotta make a second on the motion, or the motion has to be proceeded.
We had a second.
We have a second?
Oh, yeah, we have to do a second before we have a discussion. Now we've had the discussion, so now we can call the questions unless there was.
And I need it to be done by roll call by the fact that we're on. Okay, let's start with Tom.
Unless it's unanimous.
Unless it's unanimous.
So Penny's motion, which has now been discussed, is to postpone the vote, and it wasn't to a specific time, although you mentioned for a month or so, but to postpone the vote. You're saying I can't just raise hands?
Yeah, unless it's unanimous, it has to be done by roll call. It's easiest if we can start down with Tom and go down the line.
All right, I'll ask you to raise your hands, and we'll see how it goes. So all in favor of Penny's motion, please raise your hand. Okay, I see one, Christina Ross, and Penny is 2, and Maria Naughton is 3. So I have 3 people who are in favor of delaying the vote. All those in favor of against Penny's motion and proceeding with the
Okay, I have
vote.
to say your names.
I will. We'll say names. Is Tom Butterworth and Liz and Mark and Rich and John and Sven and Steve and Rob. Is he on there? Hi, Mike. Which way are you voting?
Voting against the motion.
Okay. So, so that was 9-3. So we're going to take a vote. Do I have a motion?
Steve wants to make a motion? I'd like to make a motion.
Sure.
Okay. As much as you're fired up.
I'd like to make a motion on the resolution authorizing an appropriation of $10 million for the library 2021 project for the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $10 million. Second.
But
Seconded by Mark.
You're on the wrong
We
agenda.
need to do the MOU first.
You gotta do the MOU first.
Went right for the money, John.
Four. Yeah, we're on four. That's a long four. All right, here we go. I'd like to make a motion to approve the New Canaan Library Memorandum of Understanding as written.
Do I have a second? Mark. Any discussion? Any further discussion?
I have something.
Go ahead, Maria.
Do we, as a town council, see the letter of credit prior, along the way? Are we involved in that at all?
No reason why you can't be. I don't know if technically it has
It's
to be.
not subject to our.
I'm not sure
We're
it's
gonna
subject
see
to your vote, but the Board of Selectmen will approve it. But we will certainly share the drafts before we finalize.
And can I just,
He'll share it with us before they vote.
okay. And just to clarify, are you saying, or is it true, there's no way to secure the line of credit with tangible property? It's only through this, with this agreement?
Yeah, we are not legally permitted as a municipality to take a mortgage in property. Believe it or not.
That would be considered mortgage if you put a lien on something to secure the line of credit? Is that what you're saying?
A mortgage is in real property or a building, and we're advised that we're not allowed to take a mortgage.
There's a provision in the MOU that says that the town will have a lien.
Well, lien is different than a mortgage. It means you can force the, what do? You foreclose and you get the property, right? We are not allowed to do that legally, surprisingly. I mean, I didn't believe it myself until like.
I mean, to the extent it's helpful, you could at the time take a lien on things that are not considered real property assets. A mortgage is a lien that encumbers a real property asset, which is land and building and fixtures.
Right.
But you could take a lien on other rights of the library if at the time we enter into these loan documents, it seems sensible.
We will take a lien, really two separate issues.
Yeah.
Because we wanted the negative pledge.
Correct.
But we're taking a lien on the pledges. We're taking a security interest in the pledges.
Yes.
No, as the bank would have.
Right. But at the time we sort out the
Conceivable,
actual loan document itself, it will have a variety of provisions that we didn't have the ability to sort out at the time. The library understands that, for example, the conditions to drawing, the supporting detail of what each draw will go to pay for, all of those details will be sorted out. And we could at the time, in addition to getting a pledge of the proceeds of donations, we could seek to get liens on other things that are not real property assets if it seems sensible at the time.
Well, I thought we discussed that, Tom, and decided not against that. But anyway, we can
Yeah.
discuss.
Well, right.
But we're going to file the negative pledge in land records, and that will effectively preclude the library from pledging it. So.
Correct.
Hold on, I have a question. What is the lien amount going to be for?
The lien will secure all obligations owing under the line of credit, whatever that is. But we don't even know at this point what the amount of the facility is. There's an upper amount of the facility, but at the time they may come to us and say, look, we're projecting the shortfall to be X, which could be something less than their projections. In other words, they have some collections, but not all of them are coming in. So say they come in and say, at this point, we're projecting a shortfall of $7 million, just to pick a number. It would secure all the obligations under a $7 million facility.
Okay, so the max lien amount is whatever the facility amount is that correct?
Right, together with interest and fees and all the rest of it, right?
That's spelled out, Mike, in the maximum amount in the loan.
Right.
1/3 of the project cost.
Right, because generally, just with lien law, and I have a fair amount of experience with it, you can lien up to what you're owed, right? So in and above that, there's no security interest in and above or above what the amount owed is, right? So, if the library were to go under, there's a line of credit that is unsatisfied, and there are other creditors that are making claims against the property, what protection does the town have that's legally enforceable to prevent another creditor that may have an unsatisfied lien that they're looking to foreclose on?
None.
Mike, we're gonna do due diligence before we sign the MOU. We don't want the library having other credit extended, so the library understands that. And again, we don't start extending credit until probably next September, October, and we will have a loan agreement in place.
No, I mean, I understand that. I'm just looking down the road for that contingency, right? Where there's a potential, if the line of credit can't be satisfied, we have, I guess, the lien amount up until the delta of what's not paid. But if there are creditors out there with outstanding liens that could be satisfied through the real property.
Well, it can't be. They can't have a lien on the real property. That's the thing. By definition, there can be no lien creditors on the real property.
I mean, you have mechanics liens.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
So what happens in that event?
Well, there's a provision of 701. The library shall keep the property free of any liens arising from any work. So.
No, I know, I understand that. What I'm saying is, and this happens frequently, an entity can go under and then there's multiple creditors with multiple mechanics liens filed against the property, because the property can be encumbered by a lien. So my concern is, because we have protections in here for the town, right, that say, we get the right of first refusal and all that, but what protections does the town have against creditors in and above the amount of what the town is securing through a lien? That's my and listen, I want to get to the vote and move forward here.
Mike, I would say our oversight of the operation of the library, the library ordinarily does not borrow money, right? But we will, with our oversight of the library, I'm on the board, as the two new members of the town council will be, and we will, the library is committing not to borrow money, so.
I think it's specified that we are not allowed
Right.
to impact.
I'm not saying, I'm not trying to make some unnecessary dispute here, but I'm not saying that the library is going to go on ahead and borrow more money and get another line of credit. I'm talking about the circumstance where there are other creditors, those who perform services, construction services, or what have you, or improvement services down the road, renovations. What happens in the event that there are creditor claims that are in excess of the secured lien amount that the town has? And where the library cannot satisfy those creditors.
That's not really possible. That's not really possible. I think this is something we can discuss offline with the loan agreement, et cetera, down the road. But right now there's nothing in conflict with.
I think what might give some sense of comfort is that the town has 4 town elected appointed officials on the building committee, and we're only paying month by month. So I think this is a unlikely catastrophic scenario that we're talking about.
If the library, Mike, if the library doesn't pay the roofer for putting the roof on, or the glass, which are probably 2 of the biggest line items, I guess our protection is we're gonna know it immediately. We're gonna say, why didn't you pay your roofer? Why didn't you pay the glass guy? I mean, we're gonna be part of that process. That's the only protection we have. So we're gonna know it.
The project doesn't unfold, right?
Well, and that may just be the answer, is that it's just through proper management that scenario never, comes to pass, but it may. And and it doesn't really sound like there's the protection that I'd be more comfortable with, but like you say, through proper management, that's the answer. So again, I'm not looking to make some larger issue here, but that kind of struck me as I was reading through this. That's all. But if that's what our answer is, then that's what the answer is.
I mean, you have to kind of remember that you have a lien on the future pledges. So that's $13 million. And you have a negative pledge on the property. And you can put whatever number you want on that property in downtown New Canaan, but it certainly has plenty of value. So if it's mechanics liens that are related to the building project, I would imagine they would get discharged, even if they'd have to borrow under the line of credit to pay off those creditors.
Well, I think, Chris, wasn't that the point, is that you're only ever borrowing under this line of credit to fund the completion of the construction.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So those mechanics lienors that may show up, they're very likely to have their claim satisfied by proceeds of drawings under the line of credit to finish the library building. So the only risk, I'm not saying you don't have a point, Mike, but it seems to me the only risk you have is mechanics lienors that arise as a result of mismanagement.
Potentially, right.
Or fraud, in which case we'd be contesting their lien in any event.
I think we got our answer. Thank you.
Keep in mind, Turner Construction.
Right.
Yeah.
Pretty reputable at what they did.
Right.
So let's call the question. Are we ready to vote? All right, we're ready to vote. All in favor of the resolution just described to approve the MOU as described by Steve Carl, raise your hand. So I see Tom, Liz, Mark, Rich, John, Sven, Steve, and Robin, and Maria and Mike. So all opposed, raise your hand. I see no votes. So all who are abstaining. That's Penny and Christina. Okay, I didn't see a finger. Okay, so you got that, Tucker?
Got it.
So we got 2 abstentions and 10 in favor. So the MOU is approved. Now, Steve, number 5.
Number 5, I'll reread it. Resolution authorizing, I make a motion. A resolution authorizing an appropriation of $10 million for the library 2021 project for financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds as not to, an amount not to exceed $10 million. See exhibit A. So that's the motion.
Do I have a second? Mark? Discussion? Okay,
Just a note that this is a historic moment and it's been years in the making. So that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have to call the names. So it's Tom, Liz, Mark, Rich, John, Sven, Steve, and Robin, and Maria and Mike. Opposed? None. Abstentions? Penny and Christina. So 10, 0, 2. Got it?
Got it.
Okay. Thank you. This is obviously a very big win for our community. We're going to get a fabulous library. I think that there really are no losers here. I think we've done a very good job of crafting an MOU that describes the relationship between our community library and the town. We've been very careful to stay with our original intention of a $10 million grant and not grow that. We've been very careful lately to identify the most efficient way of lending money to the new project, so that people aren't donating on the one hand, but feeling like the money is just, a lot of the money is going away to financing charges. So I think this is a win-win for everybody in the community. And I'll address Patricia Oxman as my preservationist representative in the front row. We're with you. The town council is with preservation. The library is going to be with you. And we're all going to be with you. We're all sitting on pens and needles to find out what respecting preservation is going to look like. I'm dying to see the plans from Centerbrook, just like you are. And I think that they're going to do a good, I've got to rely on the fact that they're going to do a good job. They're very good architects. And P&Z was very clear that preservation matters in this town. So I think this really is win-win. I know you're disappointed that it's not in the MOU, but it's definitely out there and it has not gone away. Not one iota. So thank you. And to all of the people who wrote alongside. Anything further?
I'll just Could I just have 5 minutes of thanks? Because this was a big deal to me anyway, because I think I started on this 15 years ago. So I just want to thank Kevin's in the room. Kevin, thank you for all you've done. Kathleen Corbin is in the room. Thank you. Nick Williams is out there somewhere as well. You guys helped usher this along. We have a process in place. The process worked. Also, town council. Once in a while, we get to pat ourselves on the back. And John Engel has led us through this most difficult part of any legislation that I've lived through. We've had more meetings on this one issue than any single issue we've ever tackled. I mean, we thought we had a lot when we approved the sidewalks. This is not even close. I mean, this is huge. The amount of time and lift that this was to get. Board of Finance, I mentioned it before. Todd Lavieri was on vacation and worked on this more than he was on vacation. I mean, this is the kind of commitment we have. And everybody out there, Chris and Tom, you guys all worked hard, and Neil, to get us here. John Goodwin, think about what they put in planning and zoning. They had 7 meetings, a record, eight meetings on this, more than 28 hours just on this one issue. I mean, think about that. These are volunteers. These are people who give their time to this town. It's unbelievable. Lynn Abney Brooks, she's employed by the town, but she's worked around the clock to get this done. I mean, thank you, Lynn. Mike Galante, traffic engineer. This guy worked around the clock, and all the guys in engineering in town. Unbelievable job. Everybody in town hall. There wasn't I don't think there was a desk in this town hall where this project didn't pass through at one point in time. I mean, every single person in this town hall worked on it. So, and I have to mention Tiger Man. I mean, this guy is present at every single meeting. He was at a meeting watching his son's Little League. And this guy has been involved in this project from the get-go. Thank you, Tiger. It's really amazing what you've done. A shout out to Nick Bamonte. Nick has helped us with ordinances, but this guy has been in and out of this MOU a million times. This guy's put in an amazing amount of hours. I know we pay him for this, but I've seen his kids in the background while he's been working on this stuff. So, thank you. Tom Stavler, and in the back of the room, Tucker Murphy. I mean, without these two, hours and hours and hours they put in. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of work that's been done. It's amazing. And Tucker even goes to the meetings that she doesn't have to do notes. She's listening on planning and zoning meetings. She's psychotic. And Linda is in the back room. Linda, you give us the foundation and the knowledge with all of your spreadsheets, everything you do to let us make these decisions. And you've been there all the way. And thank you so much for everything you're doing to make us healthy and happy to make these decisions. And Mimi was in the room and she left. Patricia's here. The Friends of the State of the 1913 group, particularly Rose and Carl Rothbard, Neely Stitchnock, Wes Haynes, Keith Simpson. These are diligent people that have worked hard the entire way. Sven and I met with them a bunch of times. And, these are our friends. They're our neighbors. They're our residents. When you live in a world that is constantly at each other, we need to figure out a way to have these conversations and not say things and do things that we wouldn't do with our own family. And I thank you guys for everything you do as well. And you've raised our level here in terms of our looking at our history, which is so important. And I know Centerbrook's going to do a good job. I know they will. I know that the library is going to do a good job and get us that building that we're all looking for. That'll be another conversation, and it'll be a lot more meetings, but we will get there. We will write an MOU. We will design a building everybody's proud of, and we will get there. I know we will. And finally, when it came to library, the board, oh my gosh, imagine being the board on this journey.
In from Narragansett, no less.
Yeah, I mean, the board, okay, so Bob Butman, I have to take a shout out. He's out there in the audience. Bob has been in every meeting as well. And from the model in his barn originally to where we are today, Bob, I can't thank you enough. This council can't thank you enough for everything you've done. So shout out to you. And the rest of the board, you guys have done an amazing job. The old facility, I said that the old facility, it's been a community gathering place for meetings and events during power outages and all that. But at the end of the day, it's where kids learn to read. It's where first dates occur. I mean,
Stephen Tracy?
Yes. And imagine the possibilities as you get older. You're going to be able to go to all kinds of continual learning at this new library. I mean, just think about that. That's what's driven everybody and been motivating for everybody to get here. All the donors and supporters and ambassadors, thank you. It takes a village to do this. It really does. It takes a great team to do this. And I had to take a second and thank everybody because this is an amazing time for this town. We are going to be an amazingly envied town. We will have a great looking downtown. And like we all always say, we are the envy of so many places in this world. And finally, let's get a shovel in the ground and get this baby going because we should have had a shovel in the ground a long time ago, but let's make this dream a reality. Thank you to everybody. And that's all I got. Very eloquent, Stephen. Thank you.
That's it for the library. We're now going to talk about ARPA funds.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I didn't mention there's the opposite.
I noticed.
You stole all my words. So I wanted to say this town runs on volunteers. We all know it. It's the fuel that drives New Canaan. And you were much better at expressing all of that than I was. But I wanted to thank all of you, all of the other bodies that have sat with this for the last 20 months. And especially my board, the board that I report to, who have worked unbelievably hard for not just these last 2 years, but for years and years. Bob, Eileen, who's here in the room, and so many others who aren't here tonight, and the ones that come, who've already gone back to Narragansett. It's an incredible effort by an entire community, and it's for the entire community. And I think everybody who voted yes, I think you're all incredible, and I think it was hard won, and democracy is messy. But I think when you're tested by fire, you get a diamond, right? Something like that. So.
I wrote a letter outlining what I thought are 4 groups. I took the lead of what I thought the selectmen decided, and
We haven't decided anything yet.
well, you guys decided to convene a public hearing,
Right.
a meeting. And who was at that public hearing? It was
Community Foundation and Laura for the Chamber of Commerce,
Chamber of
representing the
Commerce,
commercial and
Community
nonprofit.
And I added Community Foundation. Wait, and what was the third? What was the third group? Oh, Board of Finance. In the next meeting, the Board of Finance said, well, we'd like to be involved in government needs. So I made them the third paragraph. And then Conservation raised their hand and said, you know, we really want to be, you know, at the table, have a seat at the table. So those were really the 4 groups. And I said, the town council isn't really in the business of evaluating need, but clearly the Community Foundation does that, and they're very good at it. And so in the memo that I wrote to all of you, I said, we're going to have to identify some portion of this and ask them to you know, help us evaluate need and identify projects that are worth donating to. Same thing with Conservation Commission, and same thing with I'm fumbling my way through this, but you read the memo. Are there any comments on it? Is there any comments on the process that we could use to get there?
So I vaguely understood that we have a committee structure, and so infrastructure is going to be involved in this. And I mean, there were a couple that talked about getting together and having a joint meeting. Who were those 2?
So the Board of Finance identified, I think, 4 liaisons, and Tucker asked me, she just left the room, here she is. And Tucker asked me who our liaisons were, and I said to Rich, I think they were the 2 heads of our infrastructure committee and the 2 heads of our finance committee. Was that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so we've asked our 4 liaisons in the Board of Finance to convene a meeting with those experts, Community Foundation, Laura Budd in the Chamber, and Chris Shipper and the conservation folks to begin to outline a process, with dates and milestones so that the community understands. So if I have a project, I will understand whether I should be taking it to Laura Budd and the chamber and say, I think that, we should be funding this project in the downtown, but it may also be appropriate to not only take to Laura Budd and the chamber and say, I'd like to be considered for ARPA money, but also could be taken to, if you were a 501c3, you could perhaps take that same idea and that same project under this structure to the community foundation. You could take it to more than one, the way we've designed it. So that you could get potentially 2 cracks at the apple. I didn't hear anybody really talk about open space and conservation. Chris Shipper asked, that's how that happened. He was like, hey, what about us? And I was like, okay. And I added him to the original email that I sent to all of you. They weren't in it. And I added them and nobody objected. So does anybody care?
I think it's, maybe putting words in this is not, but we were both
We were at that book, yeah, we discussed.
Soon in the meeting. I think Chris is, more than just looking at open space, but the point was that during COVID, the open space that we have, parkland, right, and trails were heavily used, and perhaps that deserves some consideration when it comes to expenditure of ARPA funds. Would you say this?
Yeah, I mean,
Just
he said, that during COVID, the open space, the parks, everything was used so much that it feels that like if one staff into that as they supported during COVID. So that's where he's from.
Chris Shipper speaking as Conservation Commission Chair.
Right, Conservation Commission Chair.
He said good time for Conservation Commission to say some funds should be used for open space as they were used during COVID.
So why isn't that Board of Finance? Why isn't that just lumped under government? I mean, you could ask that question. I think, Chris's argument is we're not like other municipal projects. We should be thought of separately. And he convinced me to put them in the memo, but I have to convince you that this memo is really a roadmap for moving forward.
I mean, at this point, are we just looking for the ideas, or are we really trying to? If we're looking for ideas, then that's a good one. But we have to make that list, and it's sort of.
Well, so the memo really supposes that we're not in the business of ideas. We're in the business of allocating, right, to 4 experts or 3 or 5 or 8 or some number of experts, and then at some point coming up with maybe percentages, saying, well, so I guess it's 25, 25, 25, 25, or saying, we think 25% of this should be forward-looking, and 75% of this, together with our friends on the Board of Finance, should be reimbursing and paying expenses down that we incurred during COVID, and 25 should be reinvesting in forward-looking projects. So I think that we have to come up with certain percentages and directional, but we're not the ones who are actually picking ideas and assessing ideas. It's one thing to say that's a good idea, but we're not in the business of actually going through the rigorous process they go through down at the community foundation, or evaluating whether it's not only a good idea, but you have the tools in place to see it through.
We can use the money to improve lost revenue. So was it 2.9 million?
Linda, was it 1.9 million? The lost revenues?
Right, about 3.1.
3.1?
And that's from parking and
Right.
I know conveyance made up. The budget.
Right, that's parking is a large part of it.
Most of these meetings so far have been around what are the rules, and at this point in the meeting, somebody always turns to Linda and says, how much money and what are the rules and what are we allowed to spend? And Linda gives us the answer, but at some point, we have to really have a process in place for putting a stake in the ground. One of the questions is, do we want to defer that to our four liaisons, with the four liaisons, figure it out? Or do you guys really want to do this as a town council? That's the second question. And how much of the responsibility and authority do you want to give to those four people and those four subject matter experts?
John, can I make a comment? August has been busy on a lot of other matters. So I view the selectmen are going to discuss this on September 7th at our meeting, and we plan to make some recommendations. And the Board of Finance Committee will be working on it. So this will be a September and October project.
Right.
Try to come to some conclusions in October.
Is there recommendations coming? Specific project recommendations?
Well, my inclination, for example, is we use $2 million to reimburse us for the lost revenues, $2 million for governmental needs, and $2 million for nonprofit and other impactful community needs. That's one way.
Parsing out the whole.
Yeah.
Why get money for lost revenue?
Well, that's
why not just
because the Board of Finance wants it, I
may
think.
be something that we have to adjust going forward.
Well, again,
Lost revenue compartment may be something we deal with, and frankly, our finances are in pretty good shape. I don't necessarily.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the type of conversations
right.
we should be discussing, and frankly, I think the whole town council should be involved. If the four of us are leading it, be happy to do that. But I think it's important for everyone to be involved. Typically, we go through a budget season, we don't really get to do a whole lot. I think here we can leave a slightly different mark as well.
So the public forum that we had with the Community Foundation and the Chamber of Commerce produced some ideas, which we're going to share with you and share with the Board of Finance. I think you may very well want to have a public hearing in September and ask for more ideas from the public.
Well, I think the Fed's idea was that this is going to be a stimulus to our economy, right? Well, I think that we should, honor that and when we make our allocations.
And keep in mind, some towns lost revenues and they cut programs because of that. So that's right. We had the good fortune of having other revenues make up for it. But
when I was reading the documents, that
yeah,
sort of came to me and saying, well, we're in a slightly different.
Right.
Well, I want to apologize if I ended up putting this on the agenda. It is my daughter's birthday, so I said, why not? If I'm here anyway, we might as well be talking about it. So it was you.
I'll be home shortly. I wanted it to be its own meeting, but we decided 2 meetings this week was kind of dumb. And so then you said, should we just put it on the calendar of this meeting?
Yes.
Very good idea. Because what's going to happen is if we behave like we always behave, we meet once, we just do what we've always done and meet once a month. They're going to hand us the plan.
Exactly.
We're gonna, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't want to hear about in November that all of a sudden the 8 million, has been allocated 2 million, 2 million, 2 million. I don't want in November somebody to go, why is 2 million to pay for old, lost revenue?
Right.
I want to know that now.
And I'd like to propose that we do not, after John retires, blame him for anything that has previously happened.
I'm just trying to set the table.
Is that a form of a motion or a resolution? But I'd like to just throw out a perspective, and I want to honor the process and wait and see, and I'm sure it'll all be delightful, but just keep in mind the possibility that at least the part that we're being paid as reimbursement for expenses that have incurred, that would all just be returned to taxpayers. And this is one of the options to bookend all these other possibilities. Because sometimes government decides that maybe they're not the smartest one to make decisions about people's money.
Well, to your comment, I like to say that the town collects more than it puts in the books in terms of figuring out the mill rate. Therefore, for us to collect losses of income really doesn't apply to us because we have more than enough income. And we don't need to build the coffers of savings.
Yeah, one could argue we have to make.
Yes,
so
So we shouldn't be putting the money there, but that's not to say that the town can't think forward into the future and see what needs to carry us over the next 10 to 20 years. And I think there are a couple of areas that we should be looking at.
Christine, isn't that what the budgeting process does? I mean, the Board of Finance is obligated to come up with any increase in spending they think is, they're supposed to be looking across the spectrum.
Well,
If they think we
unfortunately,
need
they
something,
don't.
they're supposed to put it in the budget.
Well, actually, in fairness, the departments ask for their budgets, like, just like the superintendent does, and they evaluate and try to find efficiencies so the, the Board of Finance has a role, but at the end of the day, these ARPA funds are not taxpayer dollars, at least not local taxpayer dollars. And there is a sense that this is supposed to be used to stimulate and do things we wouldn't otherwise do. So,
Yeah, Kevin, my comment is different than that. And that is, isn't the budgeting process supposed to pick up those kind of things that as people have ideas, we need better infrastructure in town. Do we need a transportation system to Darien? Do we need more cell towers? Should we?
Exactly.
Right. And that's I thought that was supposed to be part of the budgeting process. So one of my first questions when these projects come forward would be, why, if we should do this now, why haven't we been doing it? Whatever it is.
because it would increase the budget.
Exactly, but we're increasing, guaranteed, if we increase the budget with that, if we do something that we wish we'd done, right, it will be in the budget next time around, right? It's full, I mean, the community foundation has a philosophy, which is when they fund something, they fund it for 1 year, maybe 2, but they don't fund it on an ongoing basis. And if it doesn't work, they're funding initiation of projects, programs, right? They're not funding an ongoing thing. And I think that needs to be something we need to be very careful about.
If all we did was to look to our forward-looking wish list things, then we would look to our 5-year capital plan and we would say, oh, that's our priority list and all that. And so what the memo I sent you was, yeah, that's a component, and that's the Board of Finance is responsible for that piece. But we also have Laura Flood, who's not part of our 5-year plan, the Community Foundation, and Chris Shipper all alongside. And those aren't in our 5-year capital plan. So what we're really having to do is come up with another five-year capital plan of projects that didn't make it into our 5-year capital plan and say, are they worth doing? Should we,
It's another source of ideas. That's right. But I guess I'm just making the point that I thought we were supposed to pick up all of the ideas on the way through.
Well,
right. The things that people thought would make the town more done.
On the way through what? This process.
On the way through the budget process. I mean, this is free money.
You don't have that structure in town to do it. We'll have Steve Kleppen here as the town planner. He would be looking at the next 5, 10, 15 years and seeing how to bring income in and how to use retail and other spaces that they have. We don't have that person anymore. So we have nobody to fill that void to into the future. But if you go to the nature center, they have projects that they hope to do in the future. Well, why don't we bring them in? The Historical Society, perhaps the library has a project that they can see. I know that the committee, has needs that they haven't addressed yet, whether it's seating within the town or planting trees or putting public bathrooms or putting an information and tourist designation. All those things need to come into play, but there's nobody that's bringing it together. And I think that the media is
that's the town's job.
Who in the town? Who in the town?
As I said, the selectmen are going to come forward with recommendations and to the Board of Finance and to the town council.
On projects or on directions?
Well, both. Both. I mean, I've heard tonight people don't like the idea of giving $2 million back to the general fund. So.
Funded by 15.
But I want it to be public. That I want everyone to hear what I'm thinking. Right. Initially, when I read in the spirit of the legislation, federal government, right. I'm going to stand on
I am too. I'm with Tom. I'm with, if we're taking this money back, everybody will give it back to the taxpayer for crying out loud. We don't need it. I mean,
one thing you cannot do under the federal law is reduce your taxes.
That's what putting in general fund does.
Well, effectively, but they've given us the ability to take back revenues that we lost, and it's not.
Right. Yeah. What's the difference? I mean,
We have kickbacks, we have a lot of kickbacks to
If they're
offset a
giving
lot
us
of that
money,
loss of parking.
it becomes an asset of the town, it sits in the general fund. And if
Right now, this is in a grant fund. It hasn't gone to the general fund. Nothing's gone to.
no, but that's the logical place it would go if you're being repaid for something that you spent. You know, you're being reimbursed, it becomes an asset of the town.
So John, can you remind us again, our 4 representatives from the council and the representatives from the Board of Finance? We have those names again.
Michael Chen, Amy Murphy Carroll, and Maria Weinhardt, from Board of Finance.
Okay. And then our representatives are.
Rich, and Mark. Penny.
And Christine.
You might, you might consider human services too, because a good part of this is, well, how has the town been, our residents been impacted by COVID, and what can we do to?
And it's also human services, not just infrastructure.
And just for the record, I think we pretty much cover everyone. Go to this.
Right.
Committees. I think we're all on.
Right.
So that's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. With that much talent on one subcommittee or committee or whatever you want to call it, they're going to come up with the plan, and they're going to hear from the Board of Selectmen, and they'll bring it to the Board of Finance and to us. I'd rather talk about what they think after they study it,
right,
than talking about, hey, we got a $6 million pie. How do we do it? Let's talk for 18 hours about it. Let's let them go into committee and come out and say, here's our findings. This is what we're.
Does such a process necessarily result in the pie being split up into many small pieces? For example, let's just say I want to contribute $2 million, right, to a railroad side, something that's been identified to be good for the downtown of Warbutt and good for, most of the citizens, and forward-looking 50 years, and it's going to cost $8 million, and we need to contribute $2 million. I don't know if this process which is already identified $15 million worth of needs, would allow big ideas to be considered.
Why not? But I think everybody can contribute to the idea pool and write in all the things you want to see. And I'm assuming you're talking about Talmadge Hill.
I'm just making an example that's not on the 5-year plan, but is forward-looking,
right?
But is really expensive. And yet, so it's compelling for so many reasons, except it's really expensive and knocks out a whole lot of other things. I don't know if this process, don't forget, allows the big idea to come to the top.
Just like tonight's big meeting where we had a vote and back and forth, I don't see that this is going to be one meeting where we solve all $6 million. I mean, I'd be amazed with this, this group in particular. We like to discuss things. So that's why that subcommittee idea, bring us the ideas, and then even at the last second, if we all of a sudden have John Engel says, darn it, we need the railroad covered, and you argue during that time, that's what you're going to do it. And we'll have votes, and that'll be the way it goes, just like it always does.
Who will vote?
John,
we will vote. It's our vote. Is it in the end coming down to it?
This is largely a legislative body decision.
Do you think the final step in the process, just like the MOU,
right,
is a town council vote?
Right.
And that's why.
I might mention too that another big idea would be the playhouse. We're about to go out with surveying public interest and downtown commercial interest and what we ought to do with the playhouse. So that would be a large chunk of money to throw at the playhouse.
Is that the Senate group?
No, we're
We can't bring anybody in until the building's brought up to code.
Yeah. We
No,
have
still very much-
$850,000 in the playhouse fund. But we never spent any the rent revenues we've gotten for 10 years, 12 years, 14 years.
And we can all disagree on what we do at the end of the day. This is a part, $6 million of money that we have coming our way. So, I mean, it should be a happy time and just everybody can agree or disagree.
Plus the Board of Ed has $1 million.
Yeah, that's $7 million.
Who
Board of Ed.
Who approves that? Does that just go to the state board of ed or something?
No, the Board of Education and the superintendent will decide where that's going.
And they pretty much have.
They have agreed to fund, for example, the SACS, the crisis counselor.
Dean of students. And
right.
summer education.
They've actually started already spending some of their money.
I thought one of the best ideas was that involving the Camp Community Foundation.
Absolutely.
For the small, a section of this somehow, that's the only way, because they have this committee set up to do this.
Well, two significant ideas came out of the forum. One was the YMCA wants to expand their infant daycare, which had a meeting today with other people that are very concerned we don't have enough infant daycare. And then Waveney Care Center is proposing to create a new telehealth service and more proactive in town. They provide the nurses for the school nurses in Wilton and their health department nurses in Wilton. So that Waveney could take a larger role. As Kathleen, chairman of the board of Waveney, knows. So they're interested in having a flood of funds. Yeah.
So am I hearing that on the idea of putting it, you say into the general fund and everybody says, oh, I don't like that. But putting it into the general fund reduces people's taxes. And what I'm hearing is.
Only if the Board of Finance decides to reduce it.
But that's a fairly cynical assumption. They won't pass any of that back to taxpayers. The general fund isn't going to grow infinitely.
Right.
I mean, the Board of Finance assumed that it reached an optimal level. And if we top that up by $3 million, it's a fair assumption. They'll say, well, that's
return it to taxpayers.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is that it's more important to focus on these forward-looking initiatives that make our community better than returning taxes to taxpayers. I'm hearing that.
I've said that 100%.
Yes.
Yes, I'm not speaking for anyone.
You're just louder than everybody else.
No, I just.
No, I hear you saying it.
People in the public want to agree with me. I hope they.
I see people nodding along with you. You're giving voice to, I think, a growing sense that people want us to identify projects.
100%.
It's important.
I think it's very important.
Did Maria want to say something? Or Mike?
What about the ice rink? Throw some money in.
What about the ice rink?
Everybody gets 50 cents. This is a long list of projects.
We've already received, we've already got, I would say maybe 24 requests of different, everything from $5,000 to $50,000. So I've just been keeping them all in a folder and we'll disperse them and analyze them, I guess, as the time goes on, as the process goes on.
So I don't want to keep everybody here all night, but I guess the last question I have is
September.
Timetable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So September it starts.
So September 7th, I expect the Board of Selectmen will consider and put some recommendations.
And we'll work on this in September and October. And when's your expectation that the town council will finally vote on things and money will begin to be?
When do you leave office?
November.
First Tuesday after the first Monday.
I suggested we do it before November.
In all seriousness,
but there's no requirement.
I get the feeling
No,
that this could take years. There's no deadline to spend.
No, and we're getting it in 2 tranches. So we're getting, how much did we get so far? 2.9? 2.9. We'll get another 2.9 next June. So
we can at least let organizations know ahead of advance.
Yeah, and Lauren Patterson will be back from her maternity leave, and I think the Community Foundation should take an further active role in this to help identify which nonprofits were impacted by COVID, and which, the number of nonprofits were banged around with COVID. So,
can I deduce from what you just said? Budget season goes sort of March, April, May.
right, it actually starts in October for us. But,
Right. So
that's why I'd like to get this done in October and then start talking about budget.
okay, so you really,
I really want to get
this
done.
is new to me.
before election.
You actually would like to move forward on a series of meetings, make a decision,
Right.
allocations before we hit the ordinary budget season.
Yes.
That's all I wanted to know.
Reflect along the pain.
Well, no, this is like, this is a big deal because a lot of people who might be thinking about this need to know, oh, This is like right on deck now, and it's gonna be over by spring.
This is
Okay.
fun. We're not sending out bills to people for this money.
I think he's kidding when he says before I leave office. The government doesn't move that fast. But thank you. All right, anything further?
You can't take it.
What?
You can't take anything further up. It's a special meeting.
Oh, right, so.
Oh, that's right.
Well, no, I mean on this.
On this.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else
Are
on
we
this?
gonna do committee reports?
You can't.
It's not,
Yeah, but you can't
Yeah,
take an
it's not a regular meeting.
you're gonna make an announcement. Yeah.
Okay, just that the, Steve, I did send that, did he, date, sorry, the high school tennis courts will be closed from September 13th, because we're perfecting the courts, and also the public courts are open. So we'll go and see them there. That's it. No meeting otherwise.
All right, motion to adjourn. All right, that's Rich, all in favor? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you. Penny.
Guys, I'm so,